This conference will now be recorded.
All right, it is 6:30. Welcome everyone to the County Board of Appeal and Equalization. Please silence your cell phones and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we do swear that we will support the Constitution
We will support the Constitution
of the United States of America
of the United States of America
and the state of Minnesota,
and the state of Minnesota,
and perform faithfully, impartially, and to the best of our ability,
impartially and to the best of our ability,
the duties of the Board of Appeal and Equalization,
the duties of the Board of Appeal and Equalization,
and for the County of Waseca
and for the County of Waseca
and the state of Minnesota
and the state of Minnesota
for the year 2024.
for the year 2024.
So help us God.
So help us God.
Thank you for coming in tonight. We'll be going through these in a certain order from our assessor, Rock Nelson.
Yeah, we have 5 that have scheduled appointments, and in the gray on there, I just have them, the ones in gray have appointments, so you can just kind of start at the top. That's the order that they scheduled them in, so we can start there.
Okay, the first one, parcel ID 12.028.0910.
Correct.
Is Jessica Royer.
Correct.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am just here to discuss our property taxes. I did have Brock and Sherry out last year just because our house was new in the county. And our town hasn't really been growing very much, so it's really hard to put a tax base basically on the new builds that we have had in the county. With that, our property taxes have gone up pretty significantly since we have built out there. I know that Woodville, when we first bought the property, went up like 18%, just because they were trying to equalize based on state. And then last year, they also went up another 22%. And now we're finally at our final for our bill that's come into context, basically with the entire bill that whole. So our property had an old house on it at one point, and so the tax value from that to our new house has obviously changed. It's taken a couple of years, so we're finally, like I mentioned, at a point where our house in a whole has actually come into full taxes. I've done some basically sales comparison just to kind of give, but like right now, excuse me, the property value on our house is $714,600. With a couple of the houses that are very similar in size, bedrooms and bathrooms, not necessarily square footage, the square footage of the other homes that I have, and some comparables are a little higher. But just given the 3 that are out by me right now, the tax value that is on those, so 15678 355th Avenue right now is a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath, which is very comparable to our home right now. Their assessment is at $735,000. In a whole, they have 39 acres, so they're not too far above us. Very similar home, ours is just a 2-story, they're just a rambler. But given the amount of acreage and the amount that acreage is actually somewhat more expensive than the square footage, I just feel like there's a very big range from our house to the houses around us that have, like, another comparable would be, address 15470 350th Avenue. They're also very newer to our home. They're a few years older, but they also have 36 acres and they're at $788,000. So I just feel like with the acreage that they have as a comparable to our own 8 acres is pretty, ours just feels like it's very high considering the other 2 properties have a significant amount of acreage to go with them. There are 2 other ones. They're on the other side, so they're in a different township, so I did not include them, but they are my neighbors. Given the sales history in Waseca right now, there's only been 2 houses, $400,000 or more. They do not have comparable acreage, however, our houses in Waseca are not selling at this point anymore. We obviously built during COVID, and we also got the upspring of all the houses going very high. So I feel like our taxing maybe needs to be reevaluated with what the sales property taxes are around. I also did some comparables within New Prague, Owatonna, Janesville, New Richland, and there was only maybe a handful of them that actually got above 500,000. Even New Prague is very up and growing. It's very similar. It's bigger than Waseca. Same with Owatonna, but the average house over there was only 600,000 and they have 11 acres. So similar comparisons just for sales quantity. Also on top of that, our property around us has had a couple of significant changes that also is going to impact our property taxes as well, including a commercial property that has now been my neighbor. I do have some pictures here. We now are, being faced with a whole slew of boats all the way around us that we were never informed of. So now we have, I think we counted the last time, 33 boats significantly impacting our property in every inch of our home, from our front door to our backyard, which I feel is a pretty substantial impact, because when you're looking at our home, we built our house up to be quiet, secluded, and now all of a sudden we have a substation and we have a commercial property next to us. So with that, I did not print off the actual research that I did find, but given a substation as well, I have a couple pictures regarding that. We have a substation in front of our property now that is 5 acres. They are building on 1 acre, and it is the entire front of our property. So no matter if you go to our garage or if you go to the entire front of our house, we see a substation now, and it's not even fully built. So given those 2 serious impacts of our property, I feel like our property does need to be reevaluated, because there is a significant decrease on properties if I was going to sell tomorrow based on those 2. I know a lot of the research that I did based on substations surrounding your property, especially ones that have been added after the fact. They range from 10 to 30% decrease in property value to $75,000 to $90,000. So it just depends on who the assessor is and how they assess the property of the county. So a lot of factors go into it. And that is why, like, I research it based on assessors.com, and one of them was inspections.com. And like I said, it ranges. It goes from the county, how it's built, and what kind of substation. So there's a lot of factors that go into, but on average, like I said, everywhere that kind of went, it's 10 to 30% or 75 to 90,000 based on the size of the substation that was added in front of our property. So with respect, I would really appreciate it if someone could kind of reevaluate our property as a whole, just because, like I said, I feel like the property value with the 2 impacts around us, as well as the other properties around us being a very similar property tax value, given the amount of acreage that they have versus us. So you guys are more than welcome to keep this too. I couldn't put it on file in time. So I'm not sure if you guys want it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, do you want me to come up there, or what do you got me there? Sure. Yeah. So I just have, when we look at properties, we're just trying to treat people equitably and fairly in the county. I did, in the summary here, this property is 7.83 acres, built in 2022. I have the assessment on there, and there are 3 comparable sales that we found. One sold for just under $600,000. It's a 1969 build that was remodeled in the early kind of 2000s, late 90s. Similar square footage. All these, right? That you have to make adjustments so you're comparing apples to apples. Just like if you have the exact same house, like you said, with 80 acres of tillable, and then the exact same house that's on a 5-acre rural residential, the price per square foot are going to be different because you're not comparing apples to apples. So you need to make adjustments for that. And that's kind of what we did here. Was we went through and we made adjustments on those sales to come to our property values. That substation that she's talking about is being built. It's in the process of being built as of January 2nd. I'm not sure. Hole in the ground, I don't know, we set values of January 2nd and it's, the 18th of June. So a lot does happen, but we're looking back at January 2nd, 2024. This property is larger than the 3 counts we have. It's 16 plus years newer than all the counts we have. It has an extra house on the property currently. It's on the lower end of the price per square foot when you look at those sale properties. So at the end of the day, I understand there just has to be adjustments made for those things. And that's why we came out with the recommended value of $758,600, which is $206 a square foot. And that matches the low end of the adjusted sale prices of those 3 properties that's sold. So, I guess that's what, if you have any questions, I can try to go into that more, but.
Questions from the board? Thank you.
Maybe one, sorry, Greg.
No, it's okay.
I just want to delve into your comment a little bit about January 2nd. Properties typically get inspected once every 5 years, unless they build or have a change or whatever. And all you can do is work with the information that you have at that time, and then work with the property owner if things change from there on out.
Correct.
Because adjustments could be made every year if something changed every year.
Yeah, and if there's always market changes, right? And there's always.
Absolutely, aside from the market, the
There's
natural market changes.
Right, there's a lot of things that happen. There's houses are appreciating, but also then there's the market. So just because the house is getting older doesn't mean necessarily the value is going down, because then you have the appreciation of the market that might overtake the depreciation.
Mhm.
But what is the exact value of a house that's 20 years newer? That's not an exact, but there has to be an adjustment made for the wear and tear of a 20-year-old plus property that's sold for $600,000.
Sure.
There has to be an adjustment. Even what she said on, if a property is 35 acres and it's 10 acres, well, that's a superior house. There would need to be an adjustment made on that sale down. And those adjustments do need to be made on all properties if you start to get into an apples to apples comparison, which is what we're trying to do, because we can always point out either way. If you're selling your house, you can point out the good. If you're the assessment, you can point out the flaws, and we're just trying to find where is that true value compared to what has sold on the open market.
Sure.
So I don't know if I answered your question.
It was helpful, thank you. Okay.
That's what we've been looking
Okay.
at. All right. Next up is going to be Kyle Johnson, 07.004.0150. He's here.
No, I could, do you want me to?
If you want to get on. Yeah.
It's recommended that it was classified as residential. There was a 20-acre split on the property that had basically measured out less than 10 productive acres. He does have over 10 productive acres. So it should just be a classification change from residential to ag. So we're recommending that it is changed, so that's probably why he did not show up.
And you communicated that to Kyle?
Yeah.
Okay.
We communicated to Odine, because Kyle was gone. Odine said he wouldn't.
Okay. Next is Bruce Berry, 05.005.4530. Good evening.
All right, thanks for your time. So this has been about a 2-year process for us. we moved out to Reeves Lake in 2020. Since the time we moved to Reeves Lake, our property value has increased by $215,000, or nearly $50,000 a year, which I think is quite excessive. I have copies of what I had given Brock earlier and what I presented at our township meeting. If you guys would like copies of that, my wife could hand them up to you. You're welcome.
I think that's what, Brock, you
I
provided
did
that to
send,
us.
yep, I
Okay,
sent
yeah.
that.
We
So
have
then
it,
let me give
we have it
you-
digitally.
Let me give you a new updated version of that,
Oh,
because one of the reasons I asked Brock why, first off, we went through the town meeting, the assessors, or the board members agreed to lower our taxes. And I asked Brock at that time, do I need to come to this? And he said, no, once the board decides, it's a done deal. So that's the premise that I was going on. So when I got this letter, I was a little shocked, so I went and talked to him. And he said, we're appealing because you didn't use the 2024 numbers, you used the 2023 numbers. And like I said, he was partially right, but he was partially wrong. Because I did use the 2024 numbers for the Lake Lily property assessments and for the Reeves Lake assessments. And so the correct versions basically go through and show you some of the changes that were made. So to start with, I looked at the Clear Lake properties. We lived on Clear Lake for pretty much all of our life. We own 3 different properties there and have sold 3 different properties there. So we're pretty familiar with the values on Clear Lake. And so we'll start there. So the average, and you can look at the numbers that show the assessed values of each property. And I picked those numbers because those properties, because they're fairly similar in size to ours as far as acreage. The square footages are a little different, but for the most part, they're all valued about the same price as far as houses. So if you look at the average price of a Clear Lake assessed value home, it comes to $577,216. That's $120,000 less in the assessed value on our lake. And you'd have to kind of admit that Clear Lake is kind of the flagship lake of our county. It's of our town and everything, so it's a pretty good comparison. So if you look at the average cost per square foot, so the 2024 numbers have increased to $271.58 per square foot as compared to $194. But if you look at the 271 per square foot, that's still almost $100 per square foot, 106, more than what ours is valued at. Ours comes up with $376 per square foot. So the Clear Lake properties obviously are valued at a less cost per square than ours, and I just don't necessarily agree that it should be that high. So the board, when the board at the township, they agreed to lower my taxes to $600,000 on the assessed value. So if you do the math on $600,000 on the assessed value, that brings our square footage down to $325 a square foot, which is still quite a bit more than the assessed values on some of the other lakes in the area. So the next properties that I looked at was Lake Lily. And Lake Lily is basically about a mile away from us by the way the crow flies. So it's real close. And I picked these lots there because they're all about the same size. Again, the average lot size was about 5 acres, the lower 5 acres, which is very consistent with what we have. The assessed value on the Lake Lily properties are 448,000 with the 2024 numbers, or nearly $250,000 less than our subdivision house on Reed's Lake. The average square foot cost on the 6 properties on Lake Lily is $256 per square foot, or $137 a square foot less than our 377. So there again, I think that's a pretty substantial difference in numbers. Then since we've basically built out there or bought out there in 2019, I found that there was about 7 other properties that have sold. And so the big is the Haley property, because I was looking either at the only thing they had on the website, or or in doing so, because I've done this earlier, I had the wrong number here. So the new number is highlighted there in blue on that change. But even with that house being sold for quite a bit more than what it was valued at, that square footage is still lower than our square footage. And that was like, I mean, a diamond in the rough as far as a buyer, or you have to be a unicorn. With interest rates, trying to sell anything over $5 is very difficult right now. And Brock had asked me, do you think we could sell it? And I said, absolutely, I don't think we could. The way it is, we're going to sell it anyhow. But yeah, and I said, no, I don't think I could sell it for that price right now because of the interest rate. Like I said, you'd have to find a unicorn to buy something like that. So the Reed Lake properties, the ones that have sold since 2019, have an average assessed value at $559,000. That's still $138,000 more than the assessed value on our property. So like I said at the board, we just was fair, and I think that bringing ours, and I gave them a range that I thought was comparable, which was like 575 to 625, and the board, they agreed that the 600,000 mark would be consistent, and that puts us at $325 a square foot, which is real consistent with the majority of the properties that we've looked at. And so I guess if you guys have any questions for me, I think that is kind of what I had to present for you. And the fact that these numbers are different than the original numbers, like I said, is because I started this process quite a while ago. So I either didn't go and update it, or the system on your website didn't do it. I can't remember. I don't know which was which. But it wasn't meant to throw numbers that were wrong. So that's what so you guys have any questions?
Right now.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
With this property, it's just, again, we're going by sales. The idea that the principal substitution is a lot of what you use when you look at different sold properties. And he brings up, points, and a lot of it is, again, apples to oranges comparison, because you need to make, in order to look at properties, you need to make them similar by using adjustments. So on the summary here that I just printed out, the original value, it was 697,300, and then it went down to the 600,000 at the local board. But the sold comparables, the market data, right across the lake, 05, 351, 0200, sold for 699,000. Smaller lot, smaller front footage. It's what was that? I think it's an older home. If you look at it, I mean, the information's on the back, but adjustments need to be made for that. Adjustments came out to 752,400. Comparable number 2, these are 2 properties on St. Olaf Lake. and 07013 1620 was a property that sold for, and then another comparable 07013 2400, property sold for 900,000. So the hard part is like, I agree, interest rates are rising, but there are people still buying properties for 700, for 925,000, for 900,000. Is it the same buyer? Is it the same market time? No. And though lake properties should go up together because Lakeshore is more valuable because there's not always the same old with Medicine Lake. They're all different lakes. Now, should they be vastly different? Not necessarily, but there are differences within lakes and lakeshore and frontage, and adjustments need to be made for that. Going to assessment comparables on Reed's Lake as well, just that subject property varies. If you go to the east, there are two properties that the original was 697,300. After it was 600,000, but comparable number, assessment count number 150040620 is valued at 721,300. That's still valued at 721,300. That assessment count number 2 on the lake there is 682,500, which are the ones right next to it there. If you go to the west of the subject, a lot smaller property, that's at 599,300, which is, it's the 052010060 to the right more. That one right there. So that one is on, 1 acre, smaller front foot. That's valued right at what the board set this one at. Now, if you're looking at, assessment comparables and trying to equalize properties, I do think properties are selling for, they obviously are selling for 900, 925, and to make them equalize in that area to make apples to apples, you have to make adjustments and comparisons for different square footage, different year builds, different square footage, all that. So that's how we came up. We wanted the recommendation of the original 697,300 because that is what puts it back into equalization with the other properties, and it makes it move in line with the comparable that's sold across the lake, which is, the property that is an inferior property and still sold for 699,000. So that's why we're at the 697,300.
Thanks, Brian.
Can I respond to his at all, or can I not do that?
Yep, go for it.
Sure. I think the property in St. Olaf that you're talking about, I think that's a new build.
One of them is,
It's a brand new build. So that's not even comparing apples to apples. If you want to do that, then that's really not comparable.
That's why the adjusted sale price on that property, though it sold
right
for over 900.
Right, but I don't know if they knew that was a new build, but it is a new build. And then, if I could argue for the entire subdivision of our 3 properties, I would, but that's not my fight. My fight is our property, and I still think that if you look at the square footage values, and if you look at our lot, sure, our lot says it's 5 acres, but 2.5 acres of that is wetlands, not usable. And as far as our frontage property on the lake, we only use 75 feet, the rest of it's so steep you can't use it. So those were never, I invited Brock to come on and look at our property, and last week, we had a week to come out and look at it. I asked him to come and do it. He did not. He declined not to. So he's never been to the property, doesn't understand 100% of what the property is. And I think that Pat has been there. So he understands how steep the bank is going down to the lake. So there's a lot of the land that's not usable as far as the acreage goes. So, and comparable to the other properties, they're smaller lots, but they got roughly kind of the same size houses. So, thank you.
Thank you.
We're in the
no different situation. I've never been in this situation where township lowered the value and then it's still coming to us.
Yep.
You know,
We have two of those
yeah,
tonight, yep. Yeah, it's not something that happens often. When part of our job is to not, doesn't matter who people are, we just look at the values of property and trying to be equitable to the people. We're trying to be fair, not only to the people that are here, but we're also trying to be fair to the people that don't come and just say, yep, I looked at my value and that's what things are selling for. We're trying to also make sure we don't create inequities with those people that aren't here, which is why we bring things forward if it's without market evidence, or if we think that, hey, this is created in unequalized situation, that's why we bring it back for another look, because at the end of the day, we have to answer to the whole public as well. And those property taxes will be shifted onto their neighbors on both sides for that decreased value.
And my only last comment on this ad is that I went through the system, went to the county board. Brock was there, Patrick was there. These guys, our representative is right here too. I don't think those numbers that increased would have changed their opinion. I can't speak for them, but I don't think it would have changed their opinion. But when you go through the process and do that, and then get appealed, which I didn't even think was something that could happen. Once they make their decision, it's, to me, that's why you have a county board, that's why you have your board at the townships, for them to evaluate that and make those decisions. And I think they made, in my opinion, a correct decision. So.
Any other questions?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's just what it would sell for on the market. That's what we're trying to get to. And we think it would sell for more than 600,000.
Next is Robert Androli, 05.024.0800. Good evening.
Yeah, I got the yield maps, who wants corn and beans on it. Any red, there's not much there. Is this a common deal where you go to the township and the assessor appeals it and you have to come back here? Is that a common?
It can be, yes. You don't have the supervisors in the township aren't as well versed as the assessor's office is. What estimated market value is, fair market value is, sale.
But aren't they supposed to, when you get the sales, don't they usually take and throw out the high sales and low sales, so they got a good average?
That's what,
Median.
right, the median.
Correct. Well, I was kind of surprised. I thought that was all cut and dried from last March, but evidently it wasn't. And as you look over the yield maps, that's about what you get over there. It's not a farm that you can farm straight through, either north or south. It's either you farm around the terraces and the hills. They have more than a 2% slope on where the terrace comes. So, and I feel that the price that the township put on there at 790,000 would have been a fair market price for it. Because if somebody come along and wanted to give me $888,300, we could sign the papers tomorrow. So And there's land that's selling for good money, you know. One sold the other day for 13,000 an acre. But that was well tiled, was high, didn't take water from nobody. Mine takes water from 3 different sites. So. I don't know what else to say, it's just that, I think it was a fair price what the township put on there, because they drive by it, they watch it. These guys come by there once every 5 years, and if they go by there and look out and it looks green, it's worth 90 CPIs in their eyes. But to get that kind of money back out of it, it's kind of hard. So, I don't know, is there any questions? Questions for Bob? No questions. I'd appreciate if you left it where it was, township put it in there.
Why don't you put it in as?
790.
All right, so this one's been kind of ongoing for years, kind of asking for the data that he seems to have brought in. It was never provided, and the reason why this one was brought up was because just nothing was provided. It was just, there was no market evidence, there was no data, it was just a decision made to lower the value to 790,000. It is an 80.2 acre parcel, 76.19 is tillable. You can see in our summary that, you know, the property value for the 2023 assessment year was 824,400. It originally had gone up to 7.75%, like most of the other agricultural properties did this year. And what ended up happening at the board was it went lower than the 2023 value. It went from 824,400 from 2023, and we went 4.5% below that when everything else was growing at 7.75%. The tillable median sold price in our county is like 88 CPI. The median, so that is throwing out the highs and the lows, that's why you do a median, is $11,601 an acre. He was previously valued at the $11,659 per acre when we had first originally valued it, which is right on with the median. After the adjustment, he is below, he's at $10,369 per acre. If you go and you look at the other properties that sold, we have 3 comparables that sold within the sales study period. Sale price, and then a tillable acre, CPI on parcel 4310480, sold for $12,913 per acre. That's tillable, per tillable acre. Comparable number 2, 4310450, 66.54 tillable acres, and sold for $888,986. That's $13,360 per acre. Comparable number 3 was a larger parcel, 040310410, 144.5 tillable acres. That sold per acre, per tillable acre, $12,099 per acre. The most recent sales, not in the sales study, and we put those in just because, you know, sometimes they say, well, that's not our township. Our township doesn't have as good of ground as that. Our 2 from Iosco, where it's, you know, 75.8 acre parcel, 70.58 acres tillable, sold for $840,000. That's $11,900 per tillable acre. And then that comp number 5 on there is again in Iosco, 05, 036, 0600, which is 80.45 acres, 78.84 tillable, sold for $1,040,000 at $13,191 per tillable acre. I get that prices in the past 3 years on residential, on agricultural, have done unprecedented things, but that doesn't mean it's not what they're selling for. And our job is to put market value on property. That's what we're statutorily obligated to do, is what it would sell for in the open market. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at the sales. We're trying to find where they land and buy. And we use the CPI because it's a way for us to go from property to property. And it's a way for us to equally treat neighbor to neighbor and go around and use that, trying to take into consideration soil type, slope, all those different things. So we recommend the value go back because of that to the 888,300, which was what we had set it for the 2024 assessment.
Questions for Brock on this?
Let's explore CPI for just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
What factors are accounted for with CPI?
It's supposed to make it maximally productive, right? It's supposed to look at the slope, look at the soil types. I mean, it's supposed to be a way to, when people list it, another reason why we use it is because when farmers go to list their property, they are using CPI. So again, I mean, when they go to sell these, if it is an 89 CPI, they're not gonna say, oh, it's 75. They're gonna list it at the 89 CPI because that's what it is. And so we're using that from our provided maps from the government to say, this is how we can equally treat people.
Let's talk about where CPI comes from. Because you don't set CPI.
No.
Where does it come from?
It comes from the government layer they let us use. They tell us the soil types and this is what they, I'm not a soil expert.
Sure.
I'm not. I am look at the market and we use what, I know the state of Minnesota's been involved in it. I know we use what they give us for soil types. They are farmers. They are.
This is considered a uniform data set.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
And these first three comparables were in the county, but not necessarily Iosco Township, right?
Right, that's why we added
The other two.
the other two,
Yeah.
just to show that, those ones are not in the study. They'll be in next year's study.
Right.
But you can see that it's not the 10,369 per acre. I mean, those are in Iosco and they're at 11,900 and 13,191 per acre.
And you don't have any way of you're basically, for the soil, you're using the CPI. You're not looking at, well, does that farm come out?
So, if there was an area of trees in there, that would not be considered part of the CPI. We just cut out what the tillable is because we value those trees different.
Right.
We don't value woods like tillable acres. So then we just pull out the tillable and say, based on all the different soil types, all the different elevation changes, what is that conglomerate of a CPI for that tillable portion?
So the terracing is taken out. It's only tillable.
Well, which you have to show me where it is on there. It would be,
You can see.
it would be all tillable, but that would be part of the slope that they have in the CPI. Now, if there's a production map where it shows there's a lot, that's why we have calls every day about how our stuff's overvalued. So we have to have something other than, oh, it's just too high, which is why we've been asking for production maps for over 3 years from before I even got here. Because we can't just make a decision based on no data. We have to have, because when his neighbor comes in and he asks, why did his go down? I need to be able to have something that says, well, this is why it went down, because that part there is not productive, so that's why there's something on there, as opposed to just hearsay that people tell us, because they tell us a lot, so.
Okay.
And Brock, you would like several years of
production.
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten a lot of pictures from people this past week saying that their land, because I get it, it's rained a lot. And I'm sure a lot of people have water issues right now. So we're getting a lot of photos saying my land isn't worth anything because look, there's water all over. Well, you're right, there is. I mean, but also that is part of,
Risk.
right, the risk and part of how, 3 years it might be good and then 1 year it's got some bad. I mean, that's,
You would need crop insurance and also production yield maps to make a good assessment of the ground, if it's overvalued or not.
And then you have 3 dry years in a year like this.
Right.
So
And
where's your data?
Yeah, so if you had 5 years of data and you had 3 good years and 2 poor years, and your value went up, at least you'd be able to base it off of dropping it by a third or doing something like that. Then you would have the data if somebody else came in to look at it and explain why. Here's the last 5 years, or here's the last 10 years.
and it's hard too because even when people sell lake homes, they might have weeds out there and it might be full of lily pads. And they clear those things and they list it and then it sells for, and it doesn't always show up in the sale price. Like those are things we need to try to look at, take into consideration, but a farmer that comes in, they know it rains, they know the cycles. Now, they're gonna take that into consideration if it completely drowns out and there's no production there and they look and they say, yep, this hasn't produced for years, that's something that we can look at, but we can't just look at 1 year, 1 week of the year and say, yep, it's wet, there's water there. Because at any time throughout the year, when it rains, if it rains hard enough, you get out there at the right time, you can take a picture of standing water.
And they could change these CPIs by just, when a lot of farms get bought now, they get system tiled out. And that changes the value also on them fairly quickly.
And sometimes we don't, it's hard because we want to have all the data we can to understand that, and I understand, it's not like everybody wants to tell us what they're doing, because the minute they say we tiled it, well now, that could be worth more. Well, if we're going to equalize properties and say those ones tiled are worth more, that means those, in a sense, people have to stick their neck out and say, yep, mine has more value. And how many people do that unless you catch them? We're trying to work with a uniform data set so we can equally apply that to all the parcels we go to.
I got a letter here from Minnesota Services. And it's got the crop productivity index ratings for Minnesota. It was put out by the Natural Resource Conservation Service. If you'd like it, I can bring it up there and give it to you to look through it. And it has on the bottom here, it's got, if there's any change in the land or terracing or anything, that's all deducted off of there. That comes from the state of Minnesota.
Last year at the meeting, after we did this whole same thing, I showed Brock the yield maps, and he didn't really know knew we needed it for something, but didn't know how to use it for. I don't know if he's looking for you guys to come up with like what Brad said, 5 years worth of yield maps or something, some kind of basis to go off of changing some of these property values, because, that farm there versus the farm next door is gonna be totally different, and you just know how they're gonna yield. This one here, you gotta plant 5 different directions in order to farm it. It looks like a nice rectangle 80, but it's not. And you can see from the corn and soybean yield map that I had there, those were the last 2 years. Beans was last year and corn was the year before. We can go back probably 5 years and get you all that, but what's that gonna do in the long run? What kind of value is he gonna make off of that? how is he gonna readjust?
That's
Value.
something we have to try to figure out, because you're right, I don't,
No, I know, that's what these guys need to help you figure out. Or maybe give you some sort of idea, because,
well, we try to go to different, equalize around the state where we have meetings with different counties and ask, okay, how are you doing it? Because we need to be doing it in a similar manner around the state. Now, that doesn't mean every single county is exactly the same. We try to be as uniform as possible, which is CER and CPI are how people cut up the properties, I guess you could say.
so if I get to, now you got 2 maps, I can get you more if I have to, I guess, and go back farther if we need to.
Yeah,
But
we just,
what's it gonna do for us in the long run?
well,
Because you
until
asked for it last year,
so we asked for it last year, but it was, when did you give it to me?
I showed you a picture of it last year at the end of this meeting last year. And you said at that point in time, you said you didn't know what you could do with that. Or what you would need to do to change the value off of that. Just because off of a yield map,
Well,
how
right,
do you
just
change the
because of
value
one-
on the land?
Right, just
You
because
didn't have
of
that
one
idea.
year, too.
So what was the point of me giving you yield maps if you didn't have an idea of what that was gonna do to change it?
It's something, well, I don't know what it will be until we look at it. Like, I can't say, oh, if you give me these maps, we're going on 20%. I don't know.
I understand that, but you have is there a thing out there that says that? You
There's
don't
no
have to-
procedure.
No
Right,
procedure,
no
so
procedure.
who does that?
Well, you could be the one to help start figure the stuff to get the procedure.
Because there's a lot of land in this county that could be changed.
And that's,
Last year you had our
that's
fire
the
here.
difficult thing,
It is.
when you start to bring.
And
That's
that's
why I
the
don't
difficult-
understand.
The difficult thing too is we do a lot of the ag from aerial. And there's gonna come a point, if we have to go out to every one of those, we might need more people then. Because there's no way we can step foot on and look at every single hill in the whole county. Which is why we try to use a uniform data set like CPI, because it also helps us look at things equally, but it also helps us get done what we need to get done. Because we have to have a system that it makes no difference if we do everything for half the county of Iosco perfect, and then we do 0% for the rest, because now half of it's good, and then the sales come in on both sides, and then now your values are all over. We have to be able to get it all done and look at every property. So if we start to look at those and we start to look at putting in a procedure, then it becomes, okay, do we have to have someone that specializes in going out and looks at topography of these ag parcels? But that's all different things where, that's things that then as a board you have to talk about, and the cost of a full-time employee, all those different things come into play.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Brad.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Was it 2 years ago that we were in trouble with the state basically for being way too low on all of our ag land? Or 3 years ago? I don't remember when that was, but we were,
Well, I know we had 7 watches when I got here. And so the state can come in, and they gave us a grace period because there was kind of a transition. But the state could come in and say, you need to move everything up. You're getting to 100%. We don't care what it is, move it up. Different houses, different property types, they all sell, they don't all just go up 10%, right? They don't all just, commercial ag, residential, properties on the lake, they all just don't go up 10%. They're moving at different rates. So if the state's gonna come in, and that creates its own mess. So we're trying to put market value on properties for the specific type of properties, what they would sell from the open market, as most efficiently as we can with the people we have, using the data we have to treat people fairly and equitably.
Good with that, Dave? Yeah. You good?
I'm good, thank you. Sorry.
Next is Calvin Preem, 09.005.0415. Good evening.
I kind of sympathize with them. And part of it, I'm gonna change a little bit how I start. I've got 10 years of history of these two farms I'm comparing. And my crop records, and those crop records come from a grain cart scale, where you weigh every kernel of grain you harvest. And to give you an example of how it's not perfect, but out of 300,000 bushel of corn we harvested last year when we hauled it in, and we finished in April, the scale at the elevator told us that we were off by 0.3 of a bushel per acre. On 240 bushel of corn, we'd be off 0.3 of a bushel. It's probably as close you're gonna get on today's standards. But that being said, the 40 I'm concerned with, when I reported on the crop production records for the multi-peril, it's about 146 acres in section 18 that gets reported every year. This 40 is part of it, and it drags it down because this 40 sets at the, probably one of the lowest points of judicial ditch 11, which if you drove by right now, there's probably 20 some acres out of the 40 that's, you can't see, it's underwater, which we've had a lot of rain, that's the way it is. My grandpa farmed it in the 60s, my uncle for 30 years after that. I've been farming it 25 years now, and it goes underwater every year, this 40. It may be 10 acres, it may be as high as I've replanted up to 29 acres. And it's a matter of, does it come as the corn's ready to harvest, or does it come when the corn's this high, or, my whole point is there's a 134 acres right next to it in section 17. The 40 is in the section 18 of Alden. And when you compare the yields in the two, they're about an average in 10 years history on the crop insurance of 18 bushel. For it to be that much less with only this 40 acres of bad ground, the rest of that ground, it's all been system tile for 30 years. Fertility is about the same, it's all about the same distance from the hog barn, so there's no big difference in the fields other than the lay of the dirt. And if you calculate that 40 acres into 140 that it is, and compare it in a percentage to what section 17 produces, it should be about, and I'm not arguing what they value the section 17, that's 11 or 12,000, is what it is, that's what stuff's selling for. My only point is this 40 is not valued that much lower than the high ground. And if you look at 10 years of crop history, it says it should be at about 79%. And I'm just, I feel like Androli's, I think it should be lower on that 40. And I came up with this formula just using 10 years worth of history. I've given that information, I got pictures and numbers as to how I came with all that. I don't need to bore you to death with all that, it's about a 79%. And I don't know if I had it on my notes that I gave you about what the percentage would have been prior. I mean, that 40 is at a lower percentage than that other field, section 17, but it wasn't, it was like 80 or 85%, not 79, it was higher. And I can answer any questions, and I agree with Androli's. I don't know how you come up with a fair answer. I looked at this and go, that's about as good as I could show you hundreds of pictures over the last 60 years. We got a lot of them of how much water comes down there. And when there's that much water, it all depends on when it comes as to how much damage it does. But that 40 draws that 146 acres down pretty hard compared to what doesn't go underwater. I just felt the value of that should be, well, my numbers say 79% of what the adjoining property is.
Am I looking at the right property? Is it this 200? This,
You gotta go down to you gotta go to section 18.
No, that was the one in section 5 in St. Mary's. That's been corrected.
5 was correct, and that was the first one. That's the one I stated, and then we went down to the section.
yeah, that's this one. Yes, yeah, it's 48. Yes.
That's valued at 412,500.
Said, they did what? 10, 4, 12, 500. Yeah. So when you say 79%, are you saying?
That's not the piece, that's a 5 acre, that's part of the field too, but that's what's right underneath that is where 40 is.
I don't know if we have that one on here.
Where's that from farm place, Cal?
Where's that?
Where's that located on your from your farm place? Just the bottom section?
It's right west of the home place, it's on County Road 2.
Yep.
So you say you're on the bottom of.
There, now you got it highlighted, that's the,
Yeah, there.
and the property right across, you can see judicial ditch 11 there. The field right across on where the home place is the field I was comparing it to, which I don't have the numbers, what it's valued at, but I took the production off of what's in section 17 and compared it to what we operate in that field in section 18 as a whole, and compared, and that 40 is drawn that. I mean, there are years if you get hit wrong, probably 2 out of 10 where there's a zero production on 20 plus acres down there. That's just how it is. Which, you know, on a 10-year average, that hits it hard. And it almost always has some reduction, but it may only, I mean, last year it drowned out. I replanted it. Everybody says, wow, you replant, you know, if it drowned out once, it's gonna drown out again. I replanted that and the combine monitored about 240 bushel an acre going through that drown out spot. So it all depends on what Mother Nature decides to do after it drowns it once.
Right. This year, we should have left the planters in the shed.
I planted it once and then Sunday the beans that I replanted were about this high and now they got foot of water on them.
So is that property has the CB 21 going through it then?
Yeah,
To the ditch.
don't get me going on that, that's another.
But it's not enough outlet, obviously.
That, well, that's part of the problem with them, judicial ditch 11. When they redid 21, there's been about 450 acres that got system tiled after that now pushes down. And as that gets full, that's why the water's setting in mine, because the level of the ditch is the level of the water in my field. So the more water that comes from the other end of tiles is what creates the problem. That's Mother Nature, and you bought the land, so you live with it.
Brock, 005 and 007 then handle.
So, yeah, 9005, 0415 is the one that one we had talked about resolved. That was a classification, it was split off, it had gotten attached to the other property, so we've talked through that one. As I was sitting here thinking, you know, everything we have, you know, thinking about, okay, new ways, how can you do this? And thinking back to your question is, well, what's it gonna do, or how can we, in order for us to get a good idea of even what those yield maps mean in sales, I would almost need to understand what the yield maps are in the actual sold properties, because if properties are selling and maybe they have a similar yield map to that one, you know, we're gonna need to look at the idea of the principle of substitution is huge in appraisal. And if that one sold and it had a similar yield map, well, then that now becomes what that yield map sells for. We could start asking for every farmer to give us 5 years of yield map. I don't know how much that's gonna, you know what I mean? I don't know how much that's gonna
Slow down your office.
slow down the office, or
Is there another data set that is a public data set that gets us there?
FSA, no.
You'll have a tough time getting farmers to give up those maps, because the good fields, they ain't gonna want you to see, they're only gonna use them like I did, but
Right.
And health benefits now.
Thank you for
Right,
that
yeah.
honesty.
And I know,
Tell 'em.
because I do the same thing, so I get that that's I've been a realtor and I've been an appraiser. And when you're a realtor, you see the best, because they want you to sell it for the best. And when you're in the assessor's office, you get to see, so I've seen both sides, and I'm just trying to figure out what would they sell for. So that's why, when we go back to these two properties you brought up, I don't know, you want me to go through them, but it's kind of the same, for the, let's see, 170,400. Pull that one up here. We are pulling out, we only have 5 acres of tillable on that. So on that total parcel, our value, our total property value per acre, we have 5.1 acres of tillable and 3.7 acres of woods and some road right of way. We do have that at 75,200 for the year. That's a $7,520 per acre. Now I know that's total, right? That's not, so we're trying to take into consideration, obviously that's not tillable, not productive, and we're trying to value it accordingly. And then it's just basically the same medians that we're using, because we're trying to treat everybody similar. And then that's the same for the 01, 018, 0200. It's the same for that one if you wanted to look through it. So our recommendations for both those are just no change for the 2024 assessed value.
Questions for Brock on those two? No? Okay,
That was the 0400, right?
You want me to do 180200 as well?
Well, not necessarily, we'll go through them now again, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So those were
the appointments, the ones with appointments.
And then do you want to touch on any of the ones in white, or are we?
I have a brief explanation there of, no change. There's 3 no change, and then there were some changes, and it just tells why they were changed. So that's really all the data we have with no appointment. We just have what they were changed to and why they changed, because we didn't necessarily set an appointment to appeal that.
Okay. Yeah, just like the bottom one, I see there's adjusted amount of tillable acres, was that?
It was the
Yeah,
total,
you paid
it was
for
the total amount that when she looked at the overhead, Cheryl pulled out tillable, and I think she had changed some of that, so. And she's out sick today, so some of those.
But you've been in contact with these individuals?
Yes.
Do you guys want to take 5 minutes?
And then we'll come back and make decisions on those.
Yep.
Okay. You're the chair, you tell me.
I was asking. We're gonna take 5 minutes. Okay, we're back. We're gonna move back into the Jessica Royer one, parcel 12.028.0910. The assessor's office had listed no change on the valuation. What are the board's wishes?
I will make a motion for no change.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Walter, a second by Commissioner Christopherson. Discussion.
I appreciate the conversation and the facts you brought before us. We pick our neighbors when we buy the property, and after that, they get to do what they want within the code, and we get to do what we want within the code. That said, I do both appreciate and sympathize that there's been some changes from the time we started this process to here we are. And apparently there may be some, obviously the boat storage is allowed there, otherwise let planning and zoning know and we'll follow up because that's what planning and zoning does. As far as the substation is concerned, when we took the snapshot of the property and said, this is when the year closes, it wasn't there, and now it's being built there. And if that is going to affect property, I would say then you'll want to be in contact with the assessor's office moving forward as it becomes a reality there, so that if we need to and we can make adjustments, that we do that. I think we're past public comment now. That's my comment. And I welcome hearing from any of the other board members that would add to my perspective.
Any other discussion, comments?
I think looking at that substation in the future, just take a look at that, see what effect it has on that property value.
Are you saying for future years?
For future years. If it is the 7 to 10% reduction in value, that'd be interesting to check into. You know, it was right across the road at one time. And then it got moved down, another half mile down. That, they voluntarily did that, so.
I don't, I know as of about 6-8 years ago when I first got on the board, there was no real data that even showed property value decreases to feedlots. I don't know if since then there's been more data collected and they do show reductions in value due to feedlots or substations, but I'm sure it's something you got to continue to look at.
Anyone else? All right, we do have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Kyle Johnson's was rectified in the office. Bruce Berry, 05.005.4530. What are the board's wishes on that one? That is coming in as value too low. It was relooked at by the township.
Chair. This, something to consider from the board here. We probably, or we believe as a board that our assessors that are using the right methodology to come up with values, knowing that it's not perfect. There's no one property the same. But what this is new to me, where it has went through a township board and then come back to us. And I'm just wondering how we can handle this if we feel like that our values are true, but the township felt when they looked at it that where they put the value was right. If there's a compromise there. And working harder at it next year, making sure that the township is using the same methods we're using.
I have to kind of agree. I think the township, at least bring our people together so they know this is what we're gonna go with and stay with, and not give you an insight saying, oh yeah, yours should be a lot lower, instead of going what Rocker and his team's gonna come up with, compare those comparables with and keep it the same. It's just tough when somebody says, well, it's gonna be lower at another government agency lower than us, and we're the controlling ones. I'll make a motion that we leave it the same.
That the assessor's office came back.
Correct.
Okay, we do have a motion. Is there a second?
There is.
Motion by Commissioner Milcross, second by Commissioner Krause. Other discussion on this?
I share Commissioner Christopherson's discomfort with second guessing the township, because I very much appreciate the work that our township supervisors do in all our townships. But at the same time, I think of that big picture and think, do they have the tools and understanding to make that decision? What data sets is it based on? I also get concerned because we have 16 townships in Waseca County, and 12, sorry. Some days it seems like 16. 12 townships in Waseca County, and without a good uniform method across all those townships, it's just well-meaning people trying to take care of their neighbors, which I don't have any problem with, but it's not very far away from the decision-making process. Even this is really hard, because Iosco is one of my townships, and I know these people, and then the township board has made some recommendations to us that they have provided no reasoning behind why they made this decision other than, well, I think it's this compared to what you did. And I really appreciate all the work that Barry's did. to, to compare all these different properties. And I read it all ahead of time and I read the new stuff. But I also know, even as I read this, I thought, well, okay, what's the real math on comparing the square footage, on comparing, there's no age on any of these comparisons. There's no, the devil is in the details, and I don't know how many different pieces of data go into each valuation. But I know it's more than just how big it is and what the assessed value is and the exact amount of lakeshore. And I've appreciated Brock's comment, and this, with both of the issues here with tillable acres, we as a board have funded our assessor's office to a certain degree, to a certain number of people, to do a certain standard of job. If we want to make sure that there are eyes on every piece of property, every 5 years, and that we are tramping over them and looking at this stuff in other than the method that we're using, which is, I'm assuming is a pretty standard statewide method, then we got to hire a lot more staff. And by the time we do that, then we charge them a lot more taxes. I've rambled enough. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Well, I'm gonna vote no to the motion. I'll tell you that right now. I think we could have looked at more of a compromise. I feel like we're undermining our township board a little bit. Whether right or wrong, I'm uncomfortable with the whole situation, but I was looking for more of a compromise.
Any other discussion?
Just one thing, if our job is to equalize it, and everybody's been treated the same, if we change one, we're not equalizing. Or is it truly all that different? And is it built with a grade of a 10 or is it built with a grade of a 5? There's just so many variables that we don't have.
Right, it's not a perfect science, so there's not a perfect value.
Anyone else want to weigh in on it? We do have a motion and we do have a second on the floor. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Roll call.
Commissioner Milbrook,
Yes.
Commissioner Krause,
Yes.
Spooner,
Yes?
Commissioner Mulder,
Yes.
Commissioner Christopherson,
No.
Commissioner Hargit.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-1.
All right. Next up is Robert Androli, 05.024.0800. This also was through the township. I guess we should get a motion on the floor and then we can have discussion. have discussion first and then get a motion on it.
My discussion is that if you look at the property that they're working, there are many different angles that tie into that. And when we talk about the CPI value of some of that, I wonder sometimes if the state just throws a map down and says, yeah, this is what it looks like across that whole section and not just one area, that 80 acres. It just looks like the value might be a little high for what they're working there. I don't necessarily think it would be the township's bottom line, but I think the value might be down a little bit.
Any other thoughts?
So what are you saying, Brad? Commissioner numbers?
I believe that, the township numbers, I think is low, but I don't think that our assessed value at our end I think it's a little high for that property through there. And I'd really like to see that, the CPI value more so, but I mean, we're beyond that right now. I just think the 88 300 is just a little high for that section, that 88 there. And I'm not saying the township number's correct either, but.
So if you bring that number down, it's gonna be, whatever you bring it down, it's gonna be stretched out to the neighboring properties.
Let's weigh in on that, or willing to make a motion.
I'd like to just say one more thing. If you look at comparable 1, 2, and 3, they all have the CPI of 89, and all three of them have a higher price per tillable acre than the one we're looking at. So there has been some adjustment. I don't know if it's the right adjustment, but it's definitely adjusted.
Often makes me wonder if the market has peaked or near peaked for a while. And then if we move it down some this year, if we did, and then values drop in the next year or two, that could make a difference also.
Well, yeah, I obviously feel the same way I did about the previous one, so.
How would you even go about coming up with a number for that when you have what the assessor's office has given you? I mean, are you gonna pick a number out of the air, or are you gonna say it's lower because it's lower?
Well, obviously, for some reason, the local authority, the township board, were looking at something that made them come up with a $790,000 value. Our assessors would argue that that wasn't the right data, and they very well may be right. And I hate that, I'm not trying to say that they're wrong, but we've got one local authority that thought it was lower. So, and it's not a perfect world. It's not a perfect science to these values. So I'm just saying that that should be in some consideration for the decision that those people made.
What was the price last year, Brad? Do you have that data? I just don't want to make an uneducated number and throw it out there for a 2024 assessment that can be looked at. And we know that this property keeps coming back. So we know that there is probably some room to move on that if there's more data.
So value for 2023, you're saying?
Yes.
824,400. $10,858 per tillable acre.
So it's up to 64,000.
Okay.
Jim,
Yes.
thank you for that question. Considering the average rate of farmland in tillable acres across the whole county, that rise isn't out of the ordinary. But I know that this has been an ongoing question of the value of this. I too hesitate to just randomly make a change without being able to point at specific data that we're using across the county. Because the work of the assessor's office is to do the same thing across all the parcels in the same way. And we know it's inexact.
I will make a motion for a no change.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Krause, a second by Ms. Spooner. Is there discussion?
When you say no change, do you mean from the 888,000?
To go with the 888,300. We went back to, it's $801 less than or more than previous. Now one's going up to 30 acre.
Any other discussion on this?
No, it's not on there. It's in the notes.
Hearing none, I'll call a vote. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Roll call.
Commissioner Milbroth,
Nay.
Commissioner Krause,
Yes.
Ms. Spooner,
Yes.
Commissioner Meltzer,
Yes.
Commissioner Horgan, and
Yes.
Christopherson. Did I say Christopherson? Sorry, Christopherson,
No.
and Commissioner Harvey.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-2.
Thank you. The next, are we gonna look at Mr. Preem's, the 007, or only the last one on the 018?
Well, as far as the you still would have to, the 09, 005, 0415, you still have to approve that
Okay,
change.
thank you. All right. I would look for a motion for that change.
Oh, it's easy, I'll move that.
All right, is there a second? Motion by Commissioner Walter, second by Commissioner Christopherson. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next would be the 01.007.0400.
Motion needed. Does it change?
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Mildrath, second by Commissioner Christopherson. Any discussion? That's for no change. All those in favor, aye? Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Next is the 01.018.0200. That is the 40 acres in section 18 that we looked at.
Could I make a clarification on the numbers that I showed you? When I asked for 79%, it's 79% of what the value of section 17 is, not section 18. I'm looking for a reduction on 18, but 20%, 21% cut on that one is a lot, but 21% off of that other one doesn't lower 18 that much. The numbers I compared were 17 to 18, so the 79% would be of what the property assessed value is of section 17.
Yeah, and what was that? What was this section 17 value?
11 to 12,000.
Is that this one?
I have 11 to 12,000.
That's quite a difference. This is like I've expressed to these guys, this is a tougher one also because it loses ground because it just can't get rid of the water. You know, it's backing up from the ditch systems. Is there any watershed off of that, or does it all have to go through your tile?
Oh no, there's 650 acres that come just off of number 21.
But you can get rid of some surface water to GD11, or does it all come through tile?
What the tile doesn't take all goes to number 11. The problem is when 11's full, it backs up through the intake, comes out into the field, it's kind of
Sure, you're
overfull.
You're as low as the ditch gets. And you said that you have quite a few years of data, but it's not split up, it's one parcel. You farm it as one parcel.
Yeah, this 40 is part of the bigger field.
Right.
That's how I had to adjust the numbers and come up with that ratio. But it compares to the other side of section 17 doesn't have anything basically that drowns out compared to this other side. That's why I compared the two, because if the number is correct on the evaluation for the appraised value on section 17, this one should be 17 or 79% of that. And if you don't think this one should be adjusted, then you should go back and adjust everything in the county $1,000 an acre higher on the other side, because you're too low on 17. Not that I want you to raise it, but.
Commissioner Christopherson, it's all one tax parcel, 140 acres, correct? 140 some acres. It's all one tax parcel.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
two different farms. The 40 is part of my uncle's farm, the other one was a neighbor's, but I own them all. And when you report the multi-peril insurance claims or the numbers, they take what's in that section, whatever you made the field, they call that all one production number.
So if you're losing 20 acres or 15 acres or 10 acres off that 10, it goes overall if you're under the crop insurance.
Right.
So if you could, and I don't know, it would be a question for Brock or Mr. Preem, if you were to put that area in a separate tax parcel and split it off, that's a possible way to reduce that value on
No, I
You
think
can't do
his
that.
tax parcel is 40 acres.
Right here.
the 40 acres.
Yeah, right
Yeah.
here.
But,
That's the 40 right there.
okay, but it's a whole part of the,
But it's part of a whole bigger field.
Part of a bigger
Yeah,
field.
this whole
Okay.
field here.
but it's not all of the 40 acres that draws out.
No,
Where the ditch runs through here, here, and here.
Right.
It sits right here.
And he's getting hurt because of county water running through there.
JD 11's full. I mean,
Right. I'm just trying to figure out how you would reduce that to get a value, a correct value on it.
I got an observation and a couple thoughts. One of the observations is that we are spending more time thinking through some of these agricultural properties, which those of us that have some stake in that game, that's the natural direction we go as board members. And we know some of the ins and outs, and it's part of your living. It's not just where you live, it's part of your living. That is supposed to be taken care of in the data we use for A1 Ag. The same way that folks who live on the lake, their property gets valued because it's on the lake. We gotta be careful that we don't distrust the process more, a uniform process in a place where our hearts naturally go. That's part of it. Because we always want to have good processes, whether it's residents, whether it's commercial, whether it's agriculture. We want the data sets we use, and we want the process of reviewing those properties to be uniform and to be reasonable. If we really think that these issues like Cal has, and I sympathize with the issue he has, because I do, then we have to look at the data sets that are being included in how we do all the properties.
But I think that's why we have this board.
It is.
You know, I mean, if you go to the Berries, I mean, I know half their property is wetland, and they got a hill that goes down the lake that's unusable. You know, so those are things you gotta talk through, and that's why we have these meetings, is put it out to the public. I mean, if we went with Brock thing, we don't just stop it and say, move on, you know, instead of having us up here to discuss this. That's, you know, the agricultural land, we talk about that, we talk, you know, the Berries place out there. You know, those are things that's why we have this board, is to meet and discuss that. You know, otherwise, Brock and his team do a fabulous work with the information they have. And I think sometimes they don't get enough credit for what they do. I mean, because I'm sure they get their ears chewed off a lot. And at some point we will, because of what we're going through now. But it's just, we have to discuss and work through these issues and just throw them out for for further reference, I guess that's where I'm going with that. It's there for us to talk about, not just rubber stamp and say, too bad, so sad, let's move on.
I appreciate that too, Commissioner.
It's even hard to find consistency with sales. You know, you got this piece of ground that was 81 tillable and went for 13,191. You got 94 CPIs go for 10.6. So, you know, it's hard to, know what. I guess my suggestion to Cal, the same way we suggested to the Androlis, is to continue to bring in yield data to our assessors. And if he shows that 3 or 4 years out of, or 3 years out of 5, he grounds out, that's got to start to have some kind of compensation to the land value. You know, or at least collect the data, you know, whether we can use it or not, I don't know.
And I think that the hard part is then getting the same, similar type of data from sales to figure out, okay, this is what the productivity is, you know, what's our uniform standard? Because everything is, it's all back again, the principle of substitution, which is if this property sold on the open market, more than likely if yours is like this one, well, the principle of substitution is well, then if this one wasn't for sale and that one was, well, they would have paid that for this one. And so when we use that data set, then we're gonna have to find that same similar data set on the sale so that then we can say, okay, now these properties that have this type of production yield sell for this. Now we know how to move those.
Right, but I think a situation like his ground, and I've got a parcel the same way, that when it's drowned out, it's drowned out. We're not comparing yields. You know, we're saying this thing drowns out 2 out of 5 years, or depending on when the water comes, you know. But, so that's a little easier for me, or I would think if I was in your shoes, a little easier to say, yeah, he loses this crop 2 out of 5 years. How do we discount that, or can we discount that?
Right.
At least if you know that.
Well, I mean, more data helps, I mean, because we have to have reasons for why we do things. And, you know, though market value is not an exact science, our process to try to get people equalized to those values is a process. So everybody could come in and go, my value is 3% higher or lower, right? Because the market on a sunny day or on a, like, there is fluctuation within a market. But when you go door to door, property to property to try to equalize values, now you have a process to put those in the right place so that when they sell, you move them all in uniform. So that's the bigger picture we have to also try to look at, is looking at it abroad. How are we treating everybody?
I understand.
But yes, more data helps.
Because if he was to put that into a CRP or a program because he's losing it, would that discount the value? Not the
CRP is valued as tillable because it's renting it to the state. So it's considered
rent.
the same, right?
Okay. But if you put it into a long-term program, then it.
So RIM would be different, like a RIM program is different than a CRP program.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm getting down.
I'll make a motion to leave the value as is with no change.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Krause, second by Commissioner Malter. Is there any other discussion on this?
I would. Yes, I would continue to take a look at that, Mr. Bream, and watch that. And if there is, we can do something in the future, I would like to see that done, you know, doing your yield data and and retaining that information to see if we can do some changes to that later.
So like 20 years of history or 30 years of history,
No, not that much.
I just didn't go any farther because it just bored you to death. I mean, it's gonna come out the same way. I mean, it's gonna give you the same ratio. I mean, you're questioning how do you adjust for that? That 79% of the higher valued land is reflective of what the crop history over the last 10 years says that one piece is worth compared to the other one. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry, pretty simple as to how you would adjust it. And I don't even know what the number is, but it wasn't that big a number. All my property taxes along with your assessments went up so much this year that I started looking at, okay, is there anything that I think that's real out of line? And this jumped right out at me.
Any other discussion? We do have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Next is Keith Raymond, 02.003.710.
So he had questioned if some of the rocky areas were cut out on his land, and they have been cut out and valued as waste, so we were not valuing those as tillable. That was his question. So we're recommending no change.
All right, look for a motion on that. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Christopherson, second by Commissioner Crowe. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign, motion carries. David Linky, 04.016.0300.
This is a property that it's ag non-homestead. They don't live on a contiguous parcel. They've been added to a special ag list to apply for different properties that are over 40 acres. So it's non-homestead, so we can't, ag classification, but we can't change any of that. It's no change.
Motion,
Make a motion.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Milbrath, second by Commissioner Walter. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign, that motion carries. Next is Richard Androli, 05.008.0110.
This is Cheryl had correspondence. Owner needs to provide FSA map information, and no interior inspection was scheduled, so we're recommending no change.
Looking for a motion on this.
Motion.
There's a second. Second. Motion by Commissioner Milbrath, second by Commissioner Christopherson. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Richard Androli, 05.008.0105.
There was some acres that were tillable, that were reduced to tillable amount of acres measured off the photometry that we had measured as tillable, so the value had changed in the count.
All right, looking for a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Walter, second by Commissioner Krause. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Mark and Jan Wolf, 05.016.0610.
Again, this is a change in tillable acres. The owner provided some FSA documentation information. CRP was adjusted based on that, adjusted the building site woods and waste based on the new information we got from the FSA document.
Okay, looking for a motion on that.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Christopherson, second by Ms. Spooner. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Curtis Kives, 05.009.0800.
Then the northwest portion of this property, there are trees not tilled area. You know, our practice now is to cut those out because non-productive, doesn't sell as much as tillable does, so that's why we removed those tillable acres and changed it, to reduce the value on those.
Looking for a motion on that.
Motion.
A second.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Milbrat, second by Commissioner Walter. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye? Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Roger Androli, 05.013.1000.
This is the same, Cheryl had adjusted some of the tillable acres.
Looking for a motion on this one.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Milbrat, second by Commissioner Christopherson. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. That concludes our list for this evening. I want to thank everyone for coming here.
I got a couple questions.
Sure.
Who is this lady over here? I don't know her, and why is she voting, and what's the story with that? Everybody's got a name tag. I don't see her.
I don't have a name tag.
No, I would be offended.
I serve as the county auditor, and as state statute, I'm part of the voting members of this committee.
Oh, that's good to know. And the other question I have is, I understand you guys rejected our proposal, which is, we have to deal with that, that's fine. But moving forward, when we go through that process, which is the right process, and those guys, where do we go? Is it just an example of you're fighting City Hall, you got nowhere to go? Because we went to where we thought was right, and all of you but one, the guy I do not know, actually said, yeah, you're right, these guys voted this. So aren't you opening up a big can of worms by not allowing your commissioners to do what they're supposed to do? And why are they in place otherwise? That's open for discussion, you guys can figure that out. Because in my opinion, I got nowhere to go. And
There is the state. You could appeal at state level.
well, yeah, but if I thought this was hard.
It's tough for us to sit up here. Bruce.
Well,
It is.
no, I understand.
And we have these every year.
Yep.
And Mr. Androli comes in with his parcel of land and we look at it.
Yep.
And we try and figure this out. And I don't, like I said before, I don't want to, our township supervisors are there forever and ever because you can't get anyone on the township. You can't get a supervisor on there. And they know these people, they farmed with them their whole life, and they see how these prices have come up, because of comparable sales or because of what's going on. And it's not a gut reaction, it's heartfelt. They know their fellow neighbor. So there is a little bit of that. I don't want to go against what the assessor's office does because I think they do a fair job. That's what they do all the time is look at comparables and they want to get into your home and some people don't want to let them in their home.
Well, I've even invited them to my home and didn't.
Right, and that's why I said, I want everyone that comes here to keep at this. Certainly don't give up. Say, you know what I'm saying? Don't give up. Well, there has to be a happy medium.
Right.
I can't say.
It's just disheartening when you go through the process. They tell me the process is right.
Right.
And then the first time, I think in Brock's career, that he appealed it. And I think it doesn't happen very often. And it's just disheartening that you guys didn't go with the board, the local board's decision. So that's all I got to say. So, thanks again for your time.
I had to make one comment too on that, because I've already texted our town boardship about this, and they all want to have at least two of you at our next township meeting, so you can explain why they reversed it, because they thought they were doing everything that they should do at the right time with the information they had from Brock and from Barry's and from Dad. And it ain't like we reversed a lot of them. You know, there was like 7 different parcels that day and we only did like 3. So it wasn't like they did something different. But Richard, Kurt, and Clarence all wanted to see these 2 of you at the next meeting, which is July 2nd at 8 o'clock in the morning. Just so you can explain why it got reversed. Because if that's the case, then they probably don't want to do this again. Waste their time.
Yeah,
Because it's
that's why waste our time. I put hours and hours and hours into getting accounts and doing this and going through the process to get basically help. So, yeah. But thanks for your time.
Thank you.
There's three states that I know of right close by us. You got Iowa down here, their valuation cannot go up over 3 or down over 3%. So it's fairly stable. When you get a valuation where it goes up $100,000, we're gonna be in a lawsuit like Trump was pretty soon. Our ground is gonna be overvalued and they'll have to go to court. But then you go out here to South Dakota, they got a 7% sales tax. And that's it, no income tax. You go to North Dakota, and they don't, if you're a resident, you don't pay no tax. But what it would do, it would eliminate all these jobs. And the sales tax probably is the fairest tax there is. You buy something, you pay the tax. Here you're at the mercy of the assessor's office or whoever. You can go through, I went through a whole string of county stuff on the valuation of this property. And some of it I figured was right, some wasn't. This poorer ground that we're got up here isn't. And you got somewhere, you got the elk out there too. And this ground shouldn't be as rated as high. I mean, it's poorer ground and ain't gonna raise the crop that the other ground does. A heavy black, you take like that farm that's old down by Otisco. And that was all dairy and that was some heavy ground. Well, that one that Ramos just bought there, 80 acres. That was wild tiled. Doesn't take water from nobody else, but it gives water. So, well, I guess that's, I just want to pick up that paper I give you. Thank you. Did you want the yield maps for that? Or are you gonna do anything with them?
If you are willing to give them to us, we'd like to take them.
Are you gonna do something with them?
We'll look at them. I don't know what we'll do with it, but we'll look at it.
Try and figure out what you could do. I mean, this red stuff around here, that isn't very good.
Thank you.
Now, let's see.
Thank you. Anything else that comes before this board? Otherwise, I look for a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion carries. We adjourn. Report.